quite all right. Still
wait a minute,
muted on
Rob.
that.
Rob told me I had to do the
Okay.
this.
I've got it for you. Rob had asked for something. I was trying to send it to him really quickly.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I would be happy to do the roll call.
Yeah, I was going to
Planning
start the
committee.
planning committee now. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Borrowy,
I am here, present.
Mr. Slocum,
Here.
and Mr. Jinks.
Presume he'll be here, but I don't think we need to wait.
Okay.
So, well, we have another meeting at 6:40, so I'm assuming we should get started. This has to do with, we'll do the pledge next go around with a regular meeting, I presume. That's good enough for all.
Yeah.
We'll do the discussion of the naming of Cheshire Park Pavilion in memory of Mark Yarden. There's a motion, obviously.
Yeah. If I may speak to that, and then I'd like to present the motion. Mark was one of two people significantly associated with Cheshire that died in 9/11. The other person being Mr. Eagleson, who lived up on Far Horizon. Mark grew up in Cheshire, and he was actually in my class, and he actually worked for me. Not at the time, and so there's some family, connection there. And I think, quite frankly, that it's time that we did recognize, since there is such a small number of people that were so intimately involved with Cheshire, that we recognize them. And this works out well because he was a runner, and we thought one of the trails might be nice to be named after him in Cheshire Park. And we, meaning his class of 1980, has been pushing for this. And since the trail's already named for somebody else, we thought of the pavilion, but the pavilion was built by my other hat, the JCs. It was actually my first project when I joined them. And so I reached out to the JCs, and they didn't mind having it named after Mark, and just recognizing that the JCs built it and whatnot. So with knowing that it was okay with them, and knowing that the class would like to have this done before our 40th reunion in October, and they want to get the sign ready and everything, and it met with approval from the various bodies necessary, I'd like to move that we recommend this to the council.
That's good. Well, I'll second that. I guess my only comment would be a question. Maybe Arnett, you recall this has been sort of a long-standing in the process, correct? It must go back a year. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Yeah, I know we had some stuff to deal with and some issues that came up, but that doesn't have to be a subject of conversation. But I know this was a seemingly longer process than we probably would have liked, given his stature in the town, and of course his untimely demise and horrible passing. So at any rate, it has a second, and I assume we should vote for this. All those in favor of moving it forward? Aye.
Aye.
So this will move along, and to that extent, that concludes the business of the planning committee.
All right, if you'll adjourn as chairman, I'll convene the budget committee meeting. All right. Budget committee, the roll call, has Mr. Jenks joined us?
I'm here.
Yes, indeed.
Great.
Hey,
Very
Jim.
good. Okay. Hi, Jim. How are you?
Good.
Sorry, we had to get started.
You guys weren't going to start without me, were you?
Well,
We
not
did.
this one,
We did,
but
Jim.
we did do the planning committee because time-wise, I'm sorry. Were you okay with the naming of the pavilion for Mark Yarden?
Oh, yeah. I think we talked about that last time.
Yeah,
We
this was
did.
sort of
We
the official.
Talked about a trail. Yeah,
Okay.
This was a little different. So
That's fine.
the trail, turns out it was already named for somebody. So this pavilion was already named for somebody, but not really. It was the Cheshire JC's pavilion, but they were fine with letting it be named for Mark.
Good.
So, all right. So I'll call the budget committee meeting to order. Note we have 100% attendance. We'll move the pledge to the regular meeting. And items 3 through 12 are consent calendar, mainly gifts. Do we have a motion to recommend
We'll
those
move
to the
consent.
council?
Second.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Great. Thank
None.
you, Mr. Jenks. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Passes unanimous. Item 13 is appropriation of an aggregate of $2,700 in donations to COVID assistance programs for reimbursement in the gift account. And and just been so generous. A community that we have. This is just indicative of that. And so I'll accept the motion to recommend this to the council.
Excuse me.
Just a
can I
question,
interrupt?
Arnett. There was an
Sure.
update on that, correct?
Yes, I'm sorry. We had an addition, late addition of $250. So the total now is
$2,950.
$2,950. Yes.
Okay, I did not put the two things together. I'm sorry.
And I
Okay,
forgot to
thank
put
you.
that in with the budget committee. Sorry. Thanks.
No problem. All right. So is there a motion for that?
Yeah, so moved.
Is there a
Second.
second? All right.
Second.
Super. Since you're ready to vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes
Aye.
unanimous. All right, item 14, authorization to apply acceptance of an appropriation of the town's share of a $200,000 open space watershed land acquisition program for the purchase of the Fen Road property. This was a grant that was received through the land trust, through a program that they were able to find and worked out. And this will be apportioned to the parties that are paying for the property in proportion to the amount that they're paying. It's staying in our title, fee simple title, but it's a three-way deal between the land trust working with this grant and the regional water authority and the town council.
I'll move that.
All right, is there a second?
Yeah, second.
Good. All right. Just one quick question. What is our net share of this that still
So,
or is?
right, so yeah, just to kind of clarify it, it gets a little confusing because there are kind of two separate $200,000 grants. There was the one that the land trust through the Audubon and Army Corps applied for. And this is a state Oswald grant, which we had contemplated when we first approved the funds to purchase 257 Fen Road. There's a lot of rules with the Oswald grants. You cannot have closed on the property at the time of submission. There was some uncertainty as to whether the grant program, especially given COVID, and they moved the deadlines around a little bit. But the good news is we ended up being able to apply for this. The deadline was, and as it says, retroactive, was June 30th. So we did apply before, and we are seeking permission to do so formally from the council now. So in short, if you'll recall, the total purchase price was $675,000. The breakdown of the three parties was the $200,000 that the land trust was responsible for through the Audubon grant, $250,000 from $225,000 from the RWA, and $250,000 from the town of Cheshire in our land acquisition account. And when we approved that back a number of months ago, and still we have not yet, as of yet, although we were very close to closing on the property, we did contemplate applying for this Oswald grant at the time. So in answer to your question, Mr. Borway, our share of 200,000, and as the agreement says, we would split with the RWA on a proportionate basis to what we put in. So it's about 53%, about 47%, hence the 250,000 and the 225.
Okay.
So we estimate that if we get the full grant of 200,000, we would be just around $106,000 that may be granted. That would defray the town of Cheshire's $250,000 contribution, and it would just therefore reimburse, if you will, the land acquisition account.
So we could be a net of 144. Oh, sorry,
144 would be roughly the net, exactly.
Right.
So in accepting the grant, I see we're appropriating 106, should it come along, but also this would allow us to appropriate any amount we should receive in that percentage without a new action.
Yeah, that's the intent, so that we don't have to.
I
come back
figured
yet
as
another
much
time.
after you explained.
I mean, if for some reason it was vastly different than that, or we wanted, certainly the council, we could decide whether to put it back on the agenda again, but the intent was to kind of do it in one fell swoop, and we
rather than come back.
We'll get it, and I think and I'm not sure if sometimes they approve lesser amounts with this program or not, or if it's all or nothing, but we wanted to kind of have some flexibility there, and again, it's net good news, because the amount out of pocket for this, from the town's perspective specifically, as you saw, could be as low as $144,000 or so on an overall $675,000 acquisition.
I assume there isn't any kind of like unusual restrictions on the use of the property from this grant program?
Yeah, nothing unusual. I mean, again, because there are conservation easements, being requested by all of the, both the RWA and the Land Trust and Audubon have specific rules for the grant that they applied for. But the good news is they're all, I mean, those have been worked out by the attorneys and they're all, really within close, approximation of what anyone else would be looking for there too. So there's been some kind of informal and, dotting of I's, if you will, with some of those easements, but it's consistent with what I think the intent of the purchase was where we are now. And I think we're, ready to move forward at this time.
Okay, good.
So would you like me to advance the motion or do we already do that? I forgot.
I think we did that.
Spencer,
That's fine.
I think so too. So Spencer, you're ready to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Passes unanimous, I assume. Thank you. And item 15, discussion and action, possible action regarding appropriation of auction proceeds totaling $10,292.35 from the sale of equipment and vehicles to the auction proceeds account for the purchase of future equipment or vehicles. And, but also I noticed maintenance of vehicles is in the council motion versus the title here. So it could be used for purchase of vehicles, but it could also be used for maintenance of vehicles, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
I
Very
think
good.
historically it's been for the purchase.
Yeah, historically it's been for the purchase. I suppose, if there's maybe an expensive part or something,
Yeah.
if that's considered maintenance. I don't think it's maintenance in terms of like service. I think it potentially.
It's not an oil change.
Right, if a
Right.
part, if a major part or a plow blade or something is damaged and needs to be replaced, to the extent we call that maintenance, that's what this, it's used for actual purchases, not for service or operating.
Okay. All right. I'm fine with that. Anybody like to advance this to the recommended of the full council?
I'll move it, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Second.
Mr. Jenks, second. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Passes unanimous. And the last item on our agenda is authorization for allocation of $9,415 from the capital non-recurring account to remedy previous structural and liner installation issues at the pool. That was certainly an interesting letter from the current contractor and his assessment of the situation. I guess I'll leave it at that. Anybody like to move a motion and then discuss this?
I'll move it.
Will there be a second?
Second.
Second to recommend this to the council? Any comment or
Just a question,
discussions?
for Sean. It seemed to me this definitely had to be done. And I was wondering because a lot of people just gripe when any amount of money's got to be spent on the pool. And I'm sure this will invite a few more comments. But was there a state of the art sort of change from when the lining was done to the new liner? I mean, I know the new contractors and any contractor loves to blame the last person in for the mess that we would
Sure.
have on almost anything. Was this a state of the art issue change or was it, I mean, I didn't get the sense this was faulty construction. It did last 12 years.
Right, and I know what you're saying. I think certainly in that amount of time, industry practices can change and recommended
Yeah.
practices can change. I toured it when the pool was drained with the contractor to inspect the grinding work that had to be done. It was really less about the other liner and more about the way the concrete walls, I guess, were positioned or sort of. The vertical nature or lack thereof was one of the issues. And so I guess I probably couldn't comment exactly on whether it's a full state of the art change, but absolutely, I think it's pretty common to see, different contractors and certainly competitors say that the other person's work is not, what it should be and not what they do. So it's not right, that kind of a thing. I understand that, perspective for sure. I will say, having seen the way this liner needed to be installed and having seen all the grinding work that was done firsthand, and I took a couple pictures of the area with my phone, and I'm convinced this, like, as you said, in order for the liner that we were purchasing to work effectively, this work had to be done. It couldn't have been foreseen before they removed the old liner, so I'm comfortable with that piece. It is the $7,600. I think as it's worth noting, the other $1,758 is for compliance with the Graham Baker requirements.
Right, the
for
safety.
safe drainage
Right.
systems. So that we would have had to pay more money to a scuba diver to do in the future. It was drained, so we went ahead and moved forward with that before refilling. So, but I mean, I certainly hear your concerns, and I think, you know, I couldn't really speak to, I guess, entirely the state of the art changes that may have happened, but I do think there's two different perspectives on it.
Well, it clearly had to be done. It's one of those things. And I suppose in 12 years, when we do this again, there's going to be someone that said they screwed up on the grinding. I just can see that conversation evolving. But then again, we're not, we won't be here in 12 years to worry about that. Okay, that's the end of it for me.
All right.
Yeah,
We
I
have
don't
a
have any-
motion.
I don't have any further
No.
comment.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Sensing you're all ready to vote.
Oh, wow. You sound like a
that-
troglodyte, Dave.
I
David, you're
pass
that
it
Dave?
unanimously. All right, with that, it's for me to switch over to the computer. What did you say?
Well, we're just having a
Wait.
lot of laugh at your expense because you sound like a troglodyte, but it was more communication, not you, I'm sure.
Oh, okay.
So whatever you said was very garbled, but I assume we're coming to an end.
Yes, we are. We
We are.
are adjourned.
Okay.
all right.
teleconference. The public hearing subject matter tonight is consideration of submission to the 2020 Neighborhood Assistance Act program. And with that, Ms. Talbot, roll call, please.
Yes. Mr. Borrowy,
Present.
Mr. Jinks? He's here. Ms. Nichols?
Here.
Here. Nichols, Chairman Orris,
Here.
Ms. Pavano,
Here.
Mr. Slocum,
Here.
Mr. Talbot,
Here.
Mr. Veliver, and Mr. Walsh.
Here.
We have a quorum, Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you, Ms. Talbot. Will you all rise and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag
of the United
United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you again to all for being here tonight. We'll have a reading of the legal notice first, and we'll have a presentation of the hearing subject matter. At that point, we'll open it up to questions, and if there are proponents or opponent statements, we'll allow them to be submitted alternatively, and then rebuttal if there is any. So with that, Ms. Talbot, would you be so kind to read the legal notice?
I would. I lost you. The Town of Cheshire Town Council, notice of public hearing 2020 Neighborhood Assistance Act submissions. The Town Council of the Town of Cheshire will hold a virtual public meeting on Tuesday, July 14th, 2020 at 7 p.m. via video teleconference. Public comments are accepted at comments@cheshirecct.org. To consider submissions to the 2020 Neighborhood Assistance Act program, electors and citizens will be heard at the public hearing concerning these submissions dated 10th of June, 2020.
Thank you very much, Ms. Talbot. At this point, we'll have a presentation of this hearing subject matter, and I'll turn it over to Town Manager Kimball.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be pretty brief. The Neighborhood Assistance Act tax credit program provides a tax credit to businesses that make cash investments in qualifying community programs conducted by tax exempt or municipal agencies. Qualifying community programs include energy conservation projects, neighborhood assistance, job training, education, community services, crime prevention, and many others. In order to obtain benefits under the program, tax exempt organization must complete and submit an application to the Town of Cheshire. The town then conducts a public hearing, which we're doing so tonight, on the applications received before the Town Council considers a vote to approve the applications, any applications received. The deadline for the town to then submit into the state program the proposed applications to the Department of Revenue Services is July 31st, 2020. We received one application this year. It was from Cheshire Academy. It is for the installation of a high efficiency boiler in their largest dormitory, which they see as one more step towards creating a more environmentally friendly, environmentally efficient campus and contributing to the overall good work being done by organizations and businesses within the town of Cheshire at large. So I think with that, that's a summary of the application received before you. And I don't know if Ms. Talbot has anything else to add to that, unless that covers it.
Ms. Talbot? Anything you'd like to add?
Sorry.
My apologies. I was just checking the email to make sure we didn't get any additional comments. I think that sums it up perfectly. If anyone has any questions, hopefully we can answer them.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Talbot. And I guess I'm going to go back to you and ask if we have any questions or comments. It sounds like we don't, but
We
certainly
do
want to
not.
make sure we ask.
We do not.
Okay, so we have no questions regarding this, and we have no comments either for or against, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I guess with that, then I'll go ahead and close this public hearing. Thank you very much. We will now move on to our normal town council meeting directly following the public hearing, again on Tuesday, July 14, 2020. We will move to our third item on the agenda, which is items for executive session. Unless anyone has a problem, we'll move this to the end. And this will include contract negotiations and personnel matters. So with that, we'll move to public communications. Ms. Talbot, do we have any public comments?
Mr. Chairman,
We do not.
I have three that were submitted to me with a request they be read into the record during the public comments section, if that is okay with you.
Yes, of course, Mr. Slocum.
Okay. I'm going to start with number one dated July 8th, 2020 from the Cheshire Republican Town Committee to the Town Council. There is a huge amount of anger in our nation right now. Cheshire is no exception. Like everywhere in America, this anger is destructive and has gotten out of hand. The incident in Cheshire we're referring to involves our town council chairman, a dedicated and hardworking elected official, and a deeply caring parent. Whatever you may think about his policy positions, and anyone has the right to disagree with them, he also has his right and obligation as our representative to state his views. We expect that from our officials. He also has the right and obligation to protect his family. No one has the right to verbally attack and threaten anyone else. This includes the family members of any elected official. This is wrong and un-American and is exactly what we are seeing in Cheshire today. These attacks and threats are so vile that the law enforcement is now pursuing possible criminal action. I repeat, there should be no verbal attacks or threats on any public official or their family members. We are calling on all citizens of Cheshire to condemn and demand an immediate stop to this reprehensible behavior. Respectfully submitted, the Republican Town Committee. That's correspondence number one. Number two is addressed to the Town Council, and it's from the Cheshire Gridiron Club Incorporated and the Cheshire High Football Alumni Association. And they requested that it got read into the record. And it begins. The Cheshire Gridiron Club, Inc. was established in 1988 to support the Cheshire High School football program with the goal of making the experience for its players as rewarding as possible. Through the contributions of its member families, the Gridiron Club continues to raise funds to be reinvested in the sports programs at Cheshire High School, with particular emphasis towards honoring the graduating seniors each season to recognize their individual and collective contributions to the legacy of Cheshire High football. In 2014, the Cheshire High School Football Alumni Association was formed by a committed alumni to strengthen the bond among former CHS football players, to promote the history of CHS football, and to raise funds to supplement the budget of the program. Like Gridiron, its aim is to make the experience for these particular Cheshire High School student athletes as rewarding as possible. It would be remiss for our organizations to avoid commenting on the events last week regarding the status of Don Drust as the head football coach at Cheshire High School. To be clear, neither the Gridiron Club nor the Football Alumni Associate Board were informed of any pending action or consideration of dismissing Coach Don Drust prior to this weekend, when the board members of each organization read the same information at the same time and on the same platforms as members of the general public. Furthermore, no member of either board was approached or solicited to request that their board take a position in favor or opposed to Coach Drust's continued employment. Things unfolded rapidly, and pursuant to the July 1, 2020 press release issued by Superintendent of Schools Jeff Solon, the matter has been resolved and clarified that Don Drust remains the head football coach. We are glad that situation resolved relatively quickly, and both organizations look forward to continue to support Don and his staff as they prepare for the 2020 season. The compass for each of our organizations points towards enhancing the experience of the players on the football team. The uncertainty of the shape and form this season will take because of the coronavirus concerns will make this a uniquely challenging campaign. All of the stakeholders in this program owe it to the kids, and particularly this year's seniors, to rally together now to support the coaching staff and meet the challenge of this once-in-a-century pandemic in which we are living. The last few days were tumultuous and emotions continue to run high. However, that is not an excuse for any physical threats towards any member of the public, which we strongly condemn. There should be zero tolerance for this toxic impulse, and we urge this community to devote its energy towards supporting our players and allowing Coach Drust and his staff to get back to work in a positive environment. This is letter number 3, Mr. Chairman and Council, to the Cheshire Town Council from the Cheshire Gridiron Club. As a follow-up to our recent statement our organization made regarding the resolution of Don Drust's status as head football coach at Cheshire High School, we offer the following in light of circumstances that have come to our attention. Last week was tumultuous for the football program as a whole, and emotions inevitably ran high. As mentioned in our prior statement, we are relieved it resolved quickly and are eager to support Coach Drust, his staff, and especially the players and their families as they embark on what will be a uniquely challenging season. However, the high emotion and tension surrounding the events of last week in no way justify personal attacks or physical threats made towards our town council chairman, his family members, or any member of this community. For the better part of the last 20 years, our town council chairman has been a very active supporter of CHS football and all youth sports in our community, beginning 15 years ago as a leader of the committee to study the feasibility of turf on our playing field. More recently, he was instrumental in leading our town government investing in concession stand and storage facility improvements at the McCleary Athletic Complex. His contributions towards and support of Cheshire football, from the youngest junior football players to the freshmen, JV, and varsity programs, are numerous. Even absent of any of that context, neither we nor any member of this community or their family members should be subjected to personal attacks or threats. We strongly condemn such behavior and urge the members of the football family to do the same. There is due process to be followed regarding any employee of the Department of Education, coach, teacher, administrator, or otherwise. Though it may not seem so ever, what was the long weekend, Coach Drust's status was resolved relatively quickly. Again, it is time to move forward in service to the kids who play on this team and to support the team and staff. We are confident that Coach Drust and his staff would agree that his efforts to prepare his team will be aided if we all commit to rejecting toxic impulses and commentary towards anyone. It is a time to rise up, lean forward, and help the students competing for Cheshire High School football team to have a positive and successful season. That so ends the public comments regarding this matter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Council.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Is there anything else from anyone for public comment? I don't see everybody, so I'm going to assume, since I didn't hear anybody, that's a no. If I could just take a quick second to acknowledge those letters, as well as the many, many people who've reached out to me and especially to my family over the last week and a half or so. It's been a very difficult week and a half, especially for my family. As an elected official, I understand that we can be the bearer of attacks, and in some cases in this environment, it's not surprising. And I guess, to say it bluntly, I'm a big boy, and if people want to pursue comments and some actions against me, I guess that's what comes with being an elected official. But I do want to underscore the fact that my wife and my 3 children were the bearers of the most vile threats and disgusting reach outs from people that I've ever seen in my life. I just don't even know what to say about it, other than the fact that it devastated my family as they were receiving them. The most vile things said about my children, who have done nothing to anyone in this community other than to be great kids who work hard, and I believe represent the town of Cheshire well. My wife has served this community in some respects, maybe more than I have. And she walks softly, carries a very small stick. She doesn't look for big recognition, but she has also served this community in so many capacities through her cancer fundraiser, where they've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in this community, in addition to her running Cheshire Junior Cheer and being part of Cheshire Young Women's, and so many other things that she's done. I was just shocked at what occurred to them. And I can tell you that I greatly appreciate all of those people, and there were many. And those of you, many of you sitting in this room, or on this call, I should say, not used to, not personal meetings, but many of you on this call that reached out, and without taking a side, and I'm not looking for anyone to do so, to just ask, how is your family doing? That meant a lot. When my family felt like they were being kicked and left in the street, it was really nice to see some people coming to our support and saying, you know what, let's help you up. You're good people. You don't deserve this, and we stand with you. And I can't thank all of those people enough for reaching out and doing that for me and my family. We will get through this. I will continue to serve this town of Cheshire like I agreed to. Many of you saw my letter in the Cheshire Herald. That was a letter that I personally wrote with great thought. And it speaks exactly to why I got involved in 2013 and why I continue to serve 4 election cycles later. It's to serve this community and to be a strong voice for the people of this community. That's what I was elected to do. That's what I will continue to do. In spite of these attacks against me and my family, it has reinvigorated my strength and belief in the people of Cheshire, particularly the good people of Cheshire who stand behind us. So I know it's long-winded, but I just want to say thank you to everyone who reached out in support of my family. Without that support, I think it would have been much worse. And thank you for coming to the aid of my wife and my children because they deserved it. So thank you, Mr. Slocum, and thank you to all the council members who took a minute to listen to what I had to say. With that, I'm going to move on to a summary of the fiscal year 1920 quarter 4 consent calendar donations. We all received in our packet a summary of the 4th quarter results. As always, the people of Cheshire have been giving like crazy. Very, very generous donations. And if anyone has any questions or comments on that, the only thing I would say is this just continues to underscore that when things arise in our community, people rise to the occasion. And it just shows how much people are giving, not only with their time, but with their treasure. And we thank them very much for that. So are there any questions or further comments on that document?
If I could add, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
that total was $54,970, which is just unbelievable.
Sure is, Mr. Slocum. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? And again, if you can just, voice your wish to speak because I can't see everybody. Okay, hearing nobody, I'm going to move on to approval of minutes of the regular meeting and public hearing of June 9, 2020, special meetings of June 16th and 23rd, 2020. And as you notice, it included a correction, which we received for the public hearing.
Moved as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Is there a second?
Second,
I'm not sure. I believe that was
Mr.
Mr.
Slocum.
Slocum. Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Is there any questions or comments on the minutes? Hearing none. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes unanimously, or those that are here. Thank you. We're going to move on to item 6, which is consent calendar. Mr. Bowery?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Continuing the generosity of our community, we have several items here that are part of the consent calendar as donations and gifts, and I would like to move the consent calendar, which is resolution 071420-1.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bowery. Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Are there any questions or comments on the consent calendar? Hearing none, other than to continue to recognize the generous donations of people from the community. I see so many people who give continuously on this list, and we thank them for that. And there's a large donation from Gabe Barnett for a bench honoring Kathy Ragone. Many of us know the Ragone family and unfortunately the terrible tragedy that they suffered this past year. And I think that's a great memoriam for Miss Ragone. And thank you to the Barnetts for making that donation. So if there's no other questions or comments, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously of those that are here. Thank you. We will move on to new business, 9A, discussion and action regarding the Neighborhood Assistance Program application from Cheshire Academy. Mr. Walsh, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Be it resolved that the Town Council approves resolution number 071420-2. Be it resolved that the Town Council approves the Cheshire Academy submission for their high efficiency boiler replacement project to the State of Connecticut 2020 Neighborhood Assistance Act program.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Pavano. Mr. Walsh?
I think we basically went over this earlier in the public hearing. They're looking to get an energy efficient boiler for their largest dorm on their campus, and anything that they can get back on that for the businesses in terms of tax incentive is great. So, but I think we already covered most of that earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Are there any questions or comments from members of the council on this matter? Okay, hearing none. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously, or those that are here. We'll move on to 9B. Acceptance and appropriation of an aggregate of $2,700 in donations to the COVID-19 Assistance Program for reimbursement to the Human Services Gift Account. Mr. Barry.
And Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee reviewed this earlier and recommends, and actually the amount is rising as we speak. It's $2,950 now. Be it resolved that the Town Council approves Resolution 071420-3. Be it resolved that the Town Council accepts and approves the following donations totaling $2,950 to the Human Services Gift Account for COVID-19 Assistance Program. Cheshire Interface Housing, $2,500. Mr. and Mrs. Jeff Daddio, $200. Brian's Guitar T-shirt fundraiser, $250.
Wow. Do we have a
Second.
second?
Second, Mr. Slocum.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. I guess as the numbers are rising as we speak, it's like the Jerry Lewis telethon, right, Mr. Barry?
Yes, sir. Good way to put it. Yes. and
Keep
you're
calling
gonna-
in, folks. The money goes to good use.
Like that.
Are there any questions or comments from members of the council
I
on this
like
matter? Okay, hearing none. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Of those that are here, we will now move on to 9D. Authorization to apply acceptance of and appropriation of the town share of a $200,000 open space watershed land acquisition program grant for the purchase of Fen Road property. Once again, Mr. Barry.
Mr. Chairman, did we want to do C or were you?
Oh, my apologies. Yes, we did. And I
We
jumped
can let
right
Mr.
over it.
Stanley and Mr.
I'm going to
Sitco
back
not have
up.
to
My
say so late.
apologies, Mr. Stanley. I, for whatever reason, I jumped right over it. Yes, thank you, Mr. Barr. We will go back to
Okay.
9C. Again, my apologies. Discussion and possible action regarding the economic incentive policy, and it is still you, Mr. Barr.
Yes, okay, thank you. As liaison to this wonderful group of hardworking volunteers, Economic Development Commission, they have recommended after many meetings and reviews, and actually, they may not realize this, but I was on YouTube watching their committee meetings and following what was going on. And they have recommended, which is in our packets, that the policy be extended with a couple of adjustments, that there be a limit to 60 days to apply with after the CO, certificate of occupancy, has been issued. And then also that the policy mentioned that the tax increment financing, which is a fairly new program from the town regarding some of the property up north, be in lieu of tax assistance. And this is something that I'd like to ask Mr. Stanley and Mr. Sitko if they would like to add some more comments into this. I know they did a lot of work checking with similar towns and geographically similar towns.
That's right. I've got a brief statement. I can just, I'll be taking a minute or two, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, I'm Bill Stanley, Chairman of the Economic Development Commission. I'm here to review the town's tax incentive policy for commercial industrial development. I recommend that it be renewed for an additional 3 years. Cheshire has had in various formats a tax incentive policy in place since 1994. The policy provides reduced tax assessments for a limited time on new commercial and industrial construction as an incentive for businesses to locate or expand in Cheshire. Since 1994, the town has realized approximately $19 million in real and personal property tax revenue from companies that have received this assistance. Our current policy, which expired on June 30, provides 50% tax abatement for 4 years for projects less than $3 million in value, and the same abatement for 7 years for greater than $3 million in value. Earlier this year, the Economic Development Commission, as Dave mentioned, formed a subcommittee consisting of myself, Dick Fromko, and Don Dobbs. Don's on the call with us tonight, so I hope he'll keep me honest, and if I say anything wrong, he'll let me know. So our subcommittee met a few times, reviewed the existing policy and compared it to what surrounding towns are doing and offering. And in addition, probably most importantly, we discussed with Jerry Sitko, the town's economic development coordinator, whether what we currently had gave him the right tools to compete with towns around us for potential new development. He assured us that the current policy gave him everything he needed. We ultimately concluded that the existing incentive policy was the correct balance between providing tax incentives and maintaining fiscal prudence. And we would recommend that it be renewed for an additional 3 years, with one minor change, as Dave alluded to, that we limit the time for applying for this aid to be no more than 60 days after the CO has been issued for the property, for the project in question. Dave mentioned, we'd also like to bring to the attention of the council that in addition to this tax abatement program, which applies anywhere in town, we also have a tax increment financing program the council approved last year that applies to the interchange zone. Although these two programs are mutually exclusive and cannot be used together, they do provide two separate avenues for a company or a developer to gain some assistance for completion of a project and hopefully give Jerry the ability to bring more and bigger projects to Cheshire in the future. That's the extent of my comments. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad. And between Don and I, we'll try and field them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stanley. Appreciate your comments. I'll at this point open it up for questions or comments from members of the council.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Don, for all your hard work on this. I just had a quick question because naturally, I always like to look at our neighboring towns and what they offer. And I see, you know, Wallingford and Southington tend to give a little bit better incentives than what we are giving. Do you find that has hurt us at all? I know we're a lot more aggressive than we were several years ago, but I also see that, you know, Southington has a 7-year one, which is 100%, 100%, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. And then they have a 5-year, which is 100, 100, 100, 75, and 50. And Wallingford has a 50 for 5 years versus 4 years. So how is that compared? Do you find that, you know, we may lose out?
I mean, I would have to defer to Jerry a little bit on that because he's actually in the trenches and dealing with these deals and knows what people are offering. I agree with you. Southington's got an enterprise zone. Wallingford's got low price electricity. So it seems like they've got some nice incentives in addition to the tax incentives. But Jerry assures us that he's pretty competitive. We've got the TIF program now, which I think gives us a little benefit up the interchange zone. Don, do you have any further thoughts on that?
No, I think you're right on with that. And like I said, I think the enterprise or the fact that we've got the interchange up there makes a big difference in attracting new businesses.
Okay, thank you.
If you look across the incentives, you know, the information that I prepared, we're probably right in the middle. You know, some towns do a lot less than Cheshire, some towns do more, and I think we're positioned right in the middle, which is probably where we should be. We're trying to remain competitive, but at the same time be fiscally responsible. And I think that's the balance we've struck here. You know, we used to do more. You know, at one point there was a waiver for building permit fees. That was done for some years, but it got expensive. And the commission talked about that a few years ago, but decided not to go for it because it seems like every year is a rough economic year anymore. And we just didn't want to go forward and approach the council to do something like that. But I think, you know, we're all, by and large, we're competitive. You know, all told, since 1994, we've had tax incentive agreements with well over 37 companies. Some of them are off the books now. Some of them are in progress. The assistance is on a grand list, and some will go on. So we've gotten a lot of inquiries, and you know, we seem to be doing pretty well with the current incentive program. You see, you know what's going on in town, and despite COVID-19, things haven't slowed down. We're getting projects, which is really good.
No, that's great, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure that you know, because the other towns have a little bit better incentives in terms of that, but we might have better incentives in terms of where our property is and some other things that we have going for us. So I see that you have to have a balance. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'd like to just make Derek Blanco from the Economic Development Commission is here with me tonight too. So I wanted to acknowledge his presence, and I don't know if you had anything to say.
It's hard to see who's back there. You're so far away from the cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Walsh, and thank you, Mr. Gromko. I did see you back there, and I was going to recognize you. It is hard to tell who's who with these masks on, but
sorry, Derek.
But I will tell you guys that, you know, kudos to all of you, Jerry and the EDC. You all are kind of the unsung heroes. You do a lot of hard work for this community. You don't get a lot of credit for it. You should get more credit for it. I think we've come a long way over the last many years in creating a really positive incentive to attract economic development, but also make sure that we're protecting what we love about the town of Cheshire. And that is a balance that's critically important. And your EDC committee, I think, knows that well. You have very dedicated people. I can't thank you all so much for what you've done. And I also want to reach out to the chamber, because Yetta and her staff also do a great job of really speaking to the benefits of the town of Cheshire. And I think as a team, a collaborative effort that we all put out there, I think we're as attractive as any community. And I certainly will support this tonight. And I commend all of you for your hard work. So thank you all for being here tonight. The fact that 3 of you are here and Jerry's here says a lot about your commitment to this community. So thank you. With that, I guess I'll open it up. Are there still other questions or comments from members of the council?
I did have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Slogan.
And it only goes to the deadline for applying for incentive would be 60. I can't recall what the original deadline was. It within a year, or have you tightened this up, and what was the reason?
There was no deadline, and
Gotcha.
we got an application recently. I was chasing the building owner for a rather long time, either taking an application there or mailing it to him. And, I started getting uncomfortable with the timeline. And, after that, I was talking to the town manager, and then ultimately the Economic Development Commission, we decided to put a deadline on the application. There was no time, but I think it's a good idea to do that. I really do.
And 60 is sufficient, you think?
Sure.
I mean, does that sort of follow practice in general? They've come across the desk in 60 days, or it's kind of normal?
I think that'll be sufficient.
I figured you talked about it, but I thought I'd ask. Thank you.
And I think, Mr. Slocum, what we've seen is most people have been well before the CO.
Exactly.
I know there were a few laggers that came in later, but by and large, and Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, I think most people are applying even before they start construction on some projects or renovations or whatever they're doing. So I would think 60 days is plenty.
The other thing I wanted to mention to the council is there are clawback provisions in the incentive agreements. Number one, it requires a 10-year stay in Cheshire, and it also requires a minimum staffing level. And we've invoked those clauses 5 times, one for a dental office, one for General Signal, 4 times actually, Alexion and Jordan Caters. We haven't lost a dime of taxpayers' money. The town is really well protected with those clauses.
I have a quick question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, absolutely,
Jim.
Mr. Vinks.
So it looks like some of the other towns have incentives for improving property and improving facades. Is that, it appears that that's not a part of our incentive package. I was just wondering why that's the case.
Well, we talked about a lot of things, Jim, to be honest with you, and we even talked about getting into a loan program. And, there are resources around us. I checked with the Waterbury Development Corporation and the Connecticut Community Investment Corporation in Hamden, or I'm sorry, New Haven, where some of our companies have gone for loans. There is the money available, so we don't want to reinvent the wheel. I like the idea about facade improvements and things, but at this stage, the town has bills to pay too, and you can't be all things to all people. So we decided to continue to pursue the tax breaks.
Okay, thanks, Jerry.
Thank you, Mr. Jinks. Any other questions or comments from members of the council?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we don't always act the same evening this is presented to us, but in lieu of the fact that we've got 3 of the members of the commission that took the time to come out here tonight, Bill, Don, and Derek, and we greatly appreciate it and their hard work. I wondered if the sense of the council might be that if I put this motion on the floor, that we might actually act on it tonight as opposed to the usual waiting till next month.
I am absolutely comfortable with voting in favor of this tonight. We had talked about maybe, because we just received it, continuing it till next month. But certainly, given the items that have been presented, I certainly agree with them. And now I do know that this program has expired. So from that perspective, if you want to put the resolution on the floor, I certainly will support it.
Good. All right.
And I will second it.
Good. Okay. Well, then be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 071420-4. Be it resolved that the town council approves the economic incentive policy for July 1, 2020 through June 30, 2023, as presented and attached per the recommendation of the Economic Development Commission.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. Thank you, Mr. Slocum. And we've obviously had a lot of dialogue on this, but I would like to ask if there's any members of the council would have any other questions or comments now that the resolution's been put on the table.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Talbot.
thank you. Not a question, but a comment. My colleagues handled all the questions, but I will add my comment just to thank Mr. Sitko for the work that he does on behalf of the town. But it's for the volunteers, Mr. Stanley, Mr. Dobbs, and Mr. Gromko, who are here tonight, and certainly the entire Economic Development Commission. We certainly appreciate your efforts, and I will absolutely support this tonight. It is vital to the future of this town, and we appreciate your work.
Thank you very much, Mr. Talbot. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the council? Okay, hearing none. With that, I will call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes unanimously of those that are here. Thank you again to all from the EDC and Mr. Sitko for all of your hard work on behalf of the community. I think you've done a great job of walking the right line of making sure the town has good economic development policy, but also has the benefits when we do attract them of some incremental tax increases, which is important. So thank you guys for your hard work.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now move on to item D, which Mr. Barrow is you again. Authorization to apply acceptance of and appropriation of the town's share of a $200,000 open space watershed land acquisition program grant for the purchase of Fen Road property.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Budget Committee earlier unanimously recommended that this motion be it resolved that the Town Council approves Resolution 071420-5. Be it resolved that the Town Council retroactively authorizes application of a $200,000 open space watershed land acquisition program grant for the purchase of 257 Fen Road. And be it further resolved that the Town Council accepts and appropriates the town's share of approximately $106,000 for said property purchase, with the remainder share with the Regional Water Authority per the memorandum of agreement on said property.
Thank you, Mr. Barrow. Is there a second?
Second.
Was that Mr. Walsh? Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh. Back to you, Mr. Barrow.
Mr. Chairman, this is a state program that has been quite prolific in helping organizations with land purchase, not to be confused with the Audubon Society grant that was obtained through the land trust for this property. That was separate from this. So this would bring our share net down to about 146,000. The reason it's retroactive is the deadline was June 30. And things are still a little bit off with the COVID and the abilities to meet and whatnot. So we're allowing the grant application to go through, which has already been filed. And then if the money does come through, and there's a pretty good chance that it will, it authorizes the appropriation of it. And so that will help keep that property even more affordable and more wonderful open space for our great town.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barrow. Are there any questions or comments from members of the council?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to say I think
Yes.
Jeff does a fabulous job with open space, and I'm sure that they will continue doing so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pavano. Any other questions or comments from members of the council? Okay, hearing none. I would like to just make a brief statement. I want to reach out to the Shrums. David and his wife have worked so hard on this project, so I want to thank them for all their hard work to make this happen. As the town knows, this is really kind of a tri-party agreement between the Rickies who own it, the Regional Water Authority, and the town of Cheshire. And I think individually, this project may not have happened, but because of the collaboration of all three parties, again, led by particularly David Shrum, who I want to thank for his efforts, I think we were able to get to a point financially that made sense for all three. And as a result of that, I think Cheshire will be the beneficiary of preserving this fine land. And I am absolutely looking forward to supporting this as well. So I just wanted to make sure I reached out to those individuals. And if there are no other comments or questions from members of the council, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes unanimously of those that are here. We will move on to 9E, discussion of possible action regarding appropriation of auction proceeds totaling $10,292.35 from the sale of equipment and vehicles to the auction proceeds account for purchase of future equipment or vehicles. Mr. Barry.
Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee earlier met and recommended unanimously that the council pass resolution. Be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 071420-6. Be it resolved that the town council accepts an aggregate of $10,292.35 in proceeds from the sales at auction of public works equipment and vehicles and appropriates said amount for maintenance and purchases of public works equipment and vehicles.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Mr. Barry.
Just briefly, 5 pieces of equipment that are surplus and not used anymore, not usable, possibly were auctioned off, and the money traditionally is put into the account for more equipment purchases to help offset the cost of those new pieces of equipment that are purchased.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Barry. Are there questions or comments from members of the council?
Just a silly question, Mr. Chairman.
Of course.
It has to do with the amounts that are received, counting down to, 0.25 cents, 0.84 cents, 0.46 cents. How do we come up with a auction prices? I'm just curious. Where do these odd numbers come? I figured you get $200, $300. Is it a percentage of a list price, or how's that work?
George, you want to hear this? The short answer, Mr. Slocum, is we go through an auction service. So it's auctioned off.
That's net proceeds? Is that what you're saying, George? Their commission comes out of it?
And everything else, yeah. So
Okay.
that's why I call the number.
That's correct.
Thanks. Okay. Silly question, but it just begged a question from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Any other questions or comments from members of the council? Okay, hearing none. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Those that are here. Thank you, Mr. Nowotny, for being here. We're going to move on to 9F, discussion and action. RE, approval of auditor agreement and appointment of auditor. Ms. Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Audit Committee would like to present this resolution to the council. Be it resolved that the Town Council approves Resolution 071420-7. Be it resolved that pursuant to the recommendation of the Audit Committee, the Town Council approves the multi-year auditing agreement with Bloom Shapiro and Company, PC, per the terms as attached. And be it further resolved that the Town Council appoints Bloom Shapiro and Company, PC, as auditor for the fiscal year 2019-2020. And be it further resolved that the Town Council appoints Bloom Shapiro and Company, PC, as auditor for a one-time internal control and operational review of certain funds at the Cheshire Public Schools.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Ms. Nichols.
Okay, here's the background. Our auditor that we've had for the past 10 or 11 years chose not to bid for this job. And so we put out an RFP and we received 2 responses. There was a committee of Jim Jascott, Finance Director, Gina DeFilio, Vincent Massiana, who's the financial officer of the Board of Education, and myself to interview the 2 candidates that came. Their proposals were, both of them, very good. We listened with great interest to both of them and decided that Bloom Shapiro was the one that we would like to go to for several reasons, among which they have a wider network of clients. They also provide a piece within this audit which addresses some technical issues, and they will review our technical policies within the school system and within the town to see if they're operating right. And so that's an important piece that was missing in the other one. The prices were a little bit separate. We asked Bloom Shapiro to sharpen their pencils, and we believe we got a great bid. There are 2 separate components to this proposal. One is for the general auditing of the town, and that is for at first for 3 years, and then a renewal possibility for 2 more after that. And the second piece is to do a separate internal audit of the Board of Education special funds that we had discussed, and that was approved by the Board of Ed and by the council in our budget. So we are pleased to be recommending them to be our auditor for the next 5 years. Jim, is Jim here? I don't see who's in that room. Are you there? Yeah.
Jim is
Did I
here.
miss anything?
I'm here, Sylvia, and I think you summed it up pretty well. So
We felt strongly that they were very, very able to fulfill the needs that we have, and we have to get at it very quickly because it all has to be accomplished by the end of this fiscal year, by the end of the calendar year, December 31st. So they've got a lot of work to do to come on board as the new company to start this process. So the audit committee was unanimous in our recommendation. Hope you all will support that.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. And with that, I'll open it up for questions or comments from members of the council. Hearing none, I guess. I'm sorry, was there somebody who had a question?
Yeah, I did have a question about the technology aspect of this, and I know you said about the schools. What is the actual scope? Will they deal with our technology committee, or they do a deep dive into the expenses associated with that? What is the actual scope of that audit?
Help me, Jim, if you can come with me on this one, but I think they were going to review the current policies and the way we manage that process and make recommendations if they see any significant issues. But they're not recommending that we change. We would be working with our tech committee as it is, the people who manage our technology. Is that correct, Jim? Anything else?
yeah, I think the focus is going to be more on internal controls, especially in light of all the issues we've had with cyber fraud and so forth. If any recommend school or town side, if there's any weaknesses in some of the practices we have, they will issue a report, which I think we'll all have a chance to review. And I think that's a nice plus to get that as part of the audit. They're going to be reviewing all our internal controls for not just our technology, but for all our financial processes. But just to have this separate focus just on the technology, I think will be a useful tool for us.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Any other questions or comments from members of the council? Okay, hearing none. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously to those that are here. We will now move on to 9G, discussion of possible action regarding award of contract for design, bidding, and construction administration services for the Norton Cafeteria Capital Project to Wojcik Architects LLC in the amount of $29,700. Mr. Slocum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be it resolved, the Town Council approves Resolution 071420-8. Be it resolved, the Town Council awards the contract for design, bidding, and construction administration services for the Norton Cafeteria Capital Project to Wojcik Architect LLC in the amount of $29,700 per the recommendation of the Public Building Commission.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Mr. Slocum.
By way of background, staff provided this statement, which I'll just review. It essentially says the RFP for design professional was advertised and responses were received on May 8th. The subcommittee reviewed the qualifications and the proposers on June 8th, and they recommended Wojcik. The scope of the project is to upgrade the servery, kitchen, storage areas to provide better flow and access to usable space for staff and students. And the project is funded with a $400,000 capital appropriation, and construction is anticipated for next summer. That would be 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Any other questions or comments from members of the council?
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Walsh.
Although I'm still trying to figure out, with bids and stuff, is this unusual to have that wide of a range on a project under 100,000, from going from 24,100 up to 93,500? I mean, they're taking the second lowest bid on that, and I'm just wondering why all these others were so much higher, in double or triple what it was. I mean, I'm assuming they're all looking at the same thing, but I just get a concern when I see such wide ranges in bids, that they're making sure that we're getting the same stuff there, and how much overage it could end up if they get into it and there's more stuff that's needed.
I can speak to that, Mr. Chairman, if it's all right.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Nawatney.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Walsh. It's with design services, it's not unusual to get this kind of variation. It just depends. One of the things that I think came out through the PBC is that some of these firms had a kitchen designer that they had hired, a specific kitchen designer, would show a higher art or a higher proposal than some of the others. Other firms are working with a kitchen designer, so you're getting kind of the same thing, just without the added professional cost, I would say. And the bulk of the work here is not in the kitchen; it's more in the servery and kind of the storage areas, that sort of thing. So the kitchen designer isn't as desirable as if you were doing a full-blown kitchen, of course, something like that. And I'll just say, Mr. Slocum did a great job explaining the project, but Wojcik did a similar kitchen project in the Doolin School a couple of years ago, and that turned out pretty well, I think, from what we hear from the school folks. So we have no expectation that it will be a success here as well.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, Mr. Nawatney. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any other questions or comments from members of the council? No? Okay. Mr. Nawatney, and I'm glad you raised it. My recollection was that we have had experience with Wojcik before, and they have performed, correct? Yeah, I think you just said that, but I just want to confirm it.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, then I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion passed unanimously to those that are here. Thank you. We'll move on to 9H, discussion of possible action regarding reward of contract for design, bidding, and construction administration services for the police department locker rooms and HVAC capital project to Jakunski Humes Architects LLC in the amount of $70,000. Mr. Slocum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be it resolved, the town council approves resolution 071420-9. Be it resolved, the council awards the contract for design, bidding, and construction admin services for the police department locker rooms and HVAC capital project to Jakunski Hume Architects LLC in the amount of $70,000 for the recommendation of the Public Building Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Mr. Slocum.
Briefly, I will sort of review what they've said, and then George may want to weigh in because this is a totally new project at some level. It's been funded, but now we're going forward with design, a really important piece. The RFP for the design professional was advertised back in May, and they reviewed the qualifications in June, and the full PBC recommended Jakunski Humes. The scope of the project is to upgrade the locker rooms. As you may recall, they're in the basement of the building, and address existing moisture issues, which I think we've all sort of experienced, but the police suffer, and to improve the air quality in the facility. The project is funded with an existing $400,000 capital appropriation, and an additional $1.4 million capital appropriation is scheduled to go to referendum, which I'll put a plug in for now. And the construction is anticipated to occur in the spring of 2021, pending successful award from the public at the referendum. That sort of is it. I know this is a new architect. I would very interested to hear George speak to that. Also interested in how the reduction of fee comes about, how that process is and everything. That's all, very good. And I'm just curious if you could illuminate on some of that.
Sure. Thank you. This is another one we had, I think we had 8 proposers on this project. And again, like Mr. Walsh said earlier, the numbers are all over the board. Jakunski Humes has an excellent track record in public safety buildings. It seems like they've specialized in those types of buildings in the last number of years. So right away, the subcommittee that was vetting this from the PBC honed in on that aspect. And the police department, who overlooked some of this as well, were invited to some of these meetings. They were very much in favor of Jakunski Humes. The subcommittee wanted to negotiate in this case, which with RFPs, we're fortunate that the town regulations allow us to do. And the number was negotiated down significantly, as you can see, about $30,000 reduction in fee. So kudos to the Public Building Commission for getting that much out of the proposer. And the proposer said they shouldn't have any problem fulfilling the scope of the project or anything else. They were happy to get it and get it into their portfolio. We're hoping for an excellent design that will deal with many issues in that building once and for all.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Nowotny. Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Are there questions or comments from members of the council?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask a question. On
Sure.
the moisture issues, did that involve any asbestos problems?
It may have involved some abatement. We'd have to test the building, and that'll be part of Jakunsky Hume's scope, is to kind of identify those areas. And we'll hire a testing company to go in. But the addition part of the building is fairly new. So I want to say 92 or 94. It's one of those. So that should be in pretty good shape. The older part of the building is from the 50s. So undoubtedly, but it was rehabbed in the 90s. So our hope is that there won't be a lot of asbestos, but remains to be seen.
Did you build in a contingent for the asbestos removal in case it was found?
Yes.
Very costly.
Yes, absolutely. And as part of that money going to referendum, there should be, we're hopeful that there should be plenty in there to take any eventualities. But we'll hopefully in a month or two, we'll have a much better handle on this with some construction cost figures and kind of a breakdown by scope.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pavano. Any other questions or comments from members of the council? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Nowotny, I have a quick question for you. You negotiated, or the PBC negotiated down to $70,000. How did that break out between the three prescribed services? Do you have that?
Not at my fingertips. So I can get a breakdown if you like for how those, whether it's design, bidding, construction administration. We can true those up if the council would like to see them.
Well, I'm just curious because I assumed that we could get to a point where we could be, let's say, through the first two phases of this and not go forward with construction administration for some reason. And I'm assuming we wouldn't be obligated to pay that last phase. Would that be correct if we didn't go forward?
That's correct. Yeah, we hire them for, those are very defined phases. So they have to actually do work in those phases to get paid anything. And as you can see, most firms kind of front load it. The design and the bidding, the bidding is literally getting the bid out for us out onto the street. So both of those are pretty much where they put the money, just for what Mr. Orr said, just in case the third part doesn't happen, the actual construction part, that's kind of the weak sister of those three pieces.
Well, in this case, they had $25,000 for initial design and cost estimating, $50,000 for bidding documents and construction phase, and then $25,000 for construction administration. Obviously totaling $100,000. They've reduced it down to 70 in total. So I'm just curious what those phases. I'm going to support it because I think having a specialty of a firm that does public safety would be important to me. I think the public needs to know, however, that this is not the lowest bid. At $70,000, we're still approximately $30,000 higher than a few of the lower bids. So I think the public needs to understand there's a reason for the PBC supporting the higher bid. I recognize the reason for their supporting a higher bid, but I think it would be important for us to understand how that 70 breaks out by the three phases.
Sure, we'll get you that. I think it's a proportional drop, but I'll get you the number.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nowotny. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the council? Hearing none, with that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes unanimously of those that are here. Thank you, George, for being here on that one. We're going to move on to 9I, authorization for allocation of $9,415 from the capital non-recurring account to remedy previous structural and liner installation issues at the pool. And as I asked Mr. Barwi to do this, the rest of us council members can duck.
I
Not
assure
even a
you,
laugh. I see Mr. Walsh laughing, but nobody else. I thought that was kind
I'm
of funny.
laughing.
I'm laughing.
Sorry, Mr. Barry. And I apologize to have you have to do this because we all should be doing this.
No, seriously, we're all going to vote on this one way or another, but it's a recommendation from the Budget Committee. Be it resolved that the Town Council approves Resolution 071420-10. Be it resolved that the Town Council allocates $9,415 from the capital non-recurring account to remedy previous structural and liner installation issues at the pool.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. Will we get a second?
I'll second it. I will
Thank you.
stand up. I'll second
Thank you, Miss Nichols.
One brave
Right.
soul amongst us, right?
Everybody else ducked. Back to you,
Exactly.
Mr. Barry.
Mr. Chairman, this $9,000 is to improve the pool with the new liner put in to make the new liner a good fit with the new technologies and new type of materials and all. And I would note for the record that I was not around when the pool liner was replaced last time. That was between terms. So I will take full credit in helping to be part of this.
The old exit stage left, I see.
Yeah, I knew when to leave and when to come back.
We got to laugh a little bit. Otherwise, we'd be crying with some of this stuff with the pool. But anyway,
I could write a
thank you.
book on this darn project.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I think we're making headway with the pool. And as I've said publicly, and I'm not afraid to say it again, I do support the pool. I do think it brings a lot to this community. We support a lot of things that not all of us use in this community, and that's one that not all of us do use, but I think it's a big asset. And now that we've got it, I think we've got to work to fine tune it, and that's what really this is all about. So we're trying to fix some of the prior issues. I think we're gaining a lot of ground on that. I thank Sean Kimball and our new Park and Rec Director, John Golak. I think he's really got his arms around this at this point. And I'm really hopeful that we're turning the corner on some of this stuff with the pool. So with that, I'm going to open it up for any questions or comments from members of the council.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, okay. I have to say, we did go with the higher bid on the new liner so that we could get it open quicker, because I think the other bids would have not gotten it done until mid-August. So I think, it was good that we did get it open, and it opened 3 weeks ago. And from what I heard, it's running pretty efficiently and everything is good. I am disappointed that, again, we have to put more money into the pool. And I know the public, this is a big issue with the public about how much money we put into it. But like Mr. Orris said, we have it, we own it. We have to take care of it. We are committed. I think John Golak is committed to making sure it's going to be run efficiently so that we don't run into future problems like this. I'm just disappointed that, the new installer, didn't see any of this beforehand. And I don't know, I don't install pool liners, so I don't know. And like Mr. Barry, I wasn't part of any of those issues either. So, but I will put on record that, I'm in favor of the pool. I'm just disappointed that the way this liner came about in the last couple of months, that we had to push it to get it done so quickly. And, but we had no choice.
Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you, Mr. Walsh. Yes, Ms. Nichols.
Yeah, I have to say, head in my hands, that I was around when this happened. I was around when, who was that?
So you were, well, I'll let you tell me what you.
I hear somebody in the
Yeah, me
background.
too. Who's that?
Hang on, Dave Barry, I'm gonna mute your line I think there's some feedback.
Okay, okay. I was around when this pool was done. I also was around when the initial proposal to put a pool at the high school in 1970 or 69 for $180,000 was turned down by the electorate. So I have history with the pool. I support the pool. I am, as Mr. Walsh says, I'm pleased to see that we have perhaps instituted some better monitoring procedures and schedules to be aware of when maintenance issues are likely to come up. And so we won't be surprised by these issues quite as frequently as we have been. I think it's a big asset to the town. I think it's something we, like we all say, needs to be maintained. I am surprised that they didn't see that this was all glued the wrong way. But perhaps that wasn't even evident until the entire liner was taken out. So I will give them a little bit of leeway there, but I will support this. I think it's important, and I'll take one for the team this time.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Mr. Slocum?
Yeah, my question goes to the closing paragraph written by Greg McMillan, I presume the owner of the company that did the liner. In closing, I'm just going to read this because it's interesting to me. In closing, the issues found are a result of poor workmanship and lack of experience in the installation of the old liner, etc. But this is what was interesting to me. The good news is the new liner is now installed and functioning perfectly. I would recommend forecasting 2035 and 2040 capital repair for possible replacement of liner. Does that dovetail with our warranty? Because that, I thought we're talking like 10, 12-year life. Maybe I forgot that part of the conversation.
That's much further than the warranty phase, but this is, I think, part of this. It comes back to, and I just to comment briefly, I did visit and tour the pool when it was empty with actually Mr. McMillan and Mr. Golick and Miss Adams to kind of inspect it myself. I had shared a lot of your same disappointment and concern over this surprise additional expense. I did inspect the grinding areas, which was actually the entire outside of the pool, and got a better understanding of the work that had to be done and verified that it actually had to be done. The liner itself, I think, is a little, as I understand it, a better thickness than the older liner. And I think, given that it will no longer be subjected to any weather or sunlight really from the summer months as the older liner was back when it was seasonally open to the air, I think that we should expect, and I think based on the repair work they had to do to make sure it was installed perfectly, he's just very confident, and I think he's standing by that this should last us for a good 25 years.
Well, I'd like to see that paragraph memorialized in every capital budget going forward, because that exceeds the warranty by some measure, as I recall. So you know, and I know these things have a tendency to blame the last guy in all the time, but you know, that's just a comment. But,
well, and we did, if I could just add on that, and it's a good point, Mr. Slocum, and we did ask to verify what he expects the life expectancy of that liner to be, which probably is why he built it into that last paragraph. But to your point before, and I was just talking to Mr. Golick today, the consultants that we've been working with for the last month on a full capital analysis and operational analysis of the pool should have their report, or at least a draft report, in the coming weeks or about a month or so. And I'm very anxious to see, as we have instructed very clearly to them, that we want to see a full schedule out for many years. And if this is where the liner falls, then this is where the liner falls. But I don't like any more surprises. In my 25 months here, I've had a number of pool surprises, and I'm as tired of them as everybody else.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Any other questions or comments from members of the council?
Sean, you had mentioned that you thought this was a thicker liner. I thought during the discussions, when they were going over it, they were all pretty much the same thickness, but you're saying this was a little thicker?
I think it's my understanding, and maybe it's a different material or different thickness of the one it was replacing, as opposed to the other two competitors that were bidding on the project. But either way, maybe thickness is the wrong word, but it has to do with basically the quality. And I know that every vendor is going to say their quality is the highest quality. We talked about this a little bit when we approved it initially, but I probably shouldn't say that it's necessarily more microns than the other, but that it is intended to last, and the technology has come a long way, even in the last 12 to 15 years, as most technology does, and that their expectation is this will hold up better longer. That's my understanding.
Thank you.
And if I could just add, because we are focusing on the overall number, there was one other piece of this that the actual cost of additional work, as you'll see in the memo, was $7,657. But the additional work wasn't actually repair work needed. It was down the line. We were going to be due next year to replace, or in January, I believe, as we are required, the safety mechanisms involving the drain, consistent with the federal Graham-Baker Act. What we typically have to do is pay scuba divers and a special team to go do that. Basically, because the pool was drained, that additional expense, it was made all the sense in the world just to do it while the pool was drained. So that piece, just for clarification, is a little different than the actual pool repair.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any other questions or comments from members of the council? Hearing none. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passed unanimously of those that are here. We'll move on to 9J. Discussion of possible action regarding the appointment of Sustainable CT Team. Ms. Pavano.
Yes, be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 07-1420-11, that the town council appoints the following members to the town Cheshire Sustainable CT Team for the term July 15, 2020 to June 30th, 2020. Jennifer Dillon, Cheshire Academy Department of History and Sustainable Coordinator. Doug Noble, Rails to Trails. Fiona Pearson, CCSU Department of Sociology and Grant Writer. Karen Schneiser, I'm not sure that I'm pronouncing that right, Cheshire Land Trust. And Bill Stanley, Economic Development Commission.
Thank you, Ms. Pavano. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Ms. Pavano?
I went back to get a little information. As part of their mission statement, the Cheshire CT, Sustainable CT Team, they said they build community and local economy to promote health and well-being with respect to the natural environment. I'd just like to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pavano.
Can I make, oh, I'm sorry. were
Yes,
you-
Ms. Nichols.
I can't tell whether you can see me or whether you were
Yep,
asking.
I can hear you. Yep.
Okay, I will support this. These people are all offer a little bit of a different perspective. Each one has a different expertise, and I think it's a good mix of people who are very invested in the community. So I, for one, will support this team and look forward to seeing what they come up with.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Other questions or comments from members of the council?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment, quick comment.
Sure. Yep, Mr. Jinks.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Sylvia just said. I think it is a good team. I think it's a nice combination of perspectives and expertise. And I just want to thank the council leadership for naming me the liaison for the last 3 days, and I appreciate that.
Well, I haven't done it yet, but we're certainly
No,
going
no.
to do that, Mr. Jinks. So
I was
you're
just,
welcome.
I was just kidding. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand. And we did discuss, the whole issue of you potentially being part of this. And I think the best way for any council member to be part of this is through a liaison format. So, hopefully you understand that and appreciate that. And I am more than happy to appoint you as the liaison to this. I know you have, your heart is in this, so we want someone to be in that position for that reason.
Yeah, thank you.
So, any other questions or comments from members of the council? Hearing none. And with that, I'll just make a brief statement. I do also think this is a good team. And remember, part of the mission of this was to make sure that various members of the community or different demographics were reflected in this team. I think this is a good start, but it only needs to be a start. We can add more members to this group as we see fit. So we wanted to get this going. We wanted to get it started. I think these 5 members are committed and will work well together, particularly with the liaison of Mr. Jinks. And as we hear from more people from different walks of our community, we'll certainly consider adding to it potentially going forward. So if there's no other questions or comments, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And as I did say, Mr. Jinks so eloquently said, I will be appointing him later on as we do some of the further appointments as the liaison to this committee. With that, we're going to move on to 9K, approval of naming of a memorial for Mark Jardum and status of naming process. Mr. Slocum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be it resolved, the town council approves resolution 071420-12. Be it resolved, the town council pursuant to the town of Cheshire naming policy and the recommendation of the planning committee names the Cheshire Park Pavilion in memory of Cheshire resident Mark Jardim, while maintaining the recognition of the Cheshire J.C.'s for donating the pavilion. The signage shall read, Mark Jardim Memorial Pavilion, built and donated by Cheshire J.C.'s 1981.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Is there a second?
Second,
I think that was Mr. Walsh, correct?
yes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Slocum?
You know, I'm going to ask Mr. Bowery to speak to this only because he has a personal connection, which I only became aware of honestly during our planning committee meeting. And with that, if I could just hand the baton for a little depth on this to Mr. Bowery.
Thank you. If I may, this has been a long time coming. This is a fitting honor to somebody who was raised in Cheshire, grew up in Cheshire. Mark was somebody who was in my class, and we have our 40th reunion coming up in October. So the hope was to have this done because the reunion will be there at Cheshire Park, providing it can go on. And Mark was a runner on the high school team, and he used to like to run through the Cheshire Park. And the thought was to name part of the trail back there for him. But in researching that, the trail was already named for somebody previously, so that really wouldn't work. And the JCs, who I also happen to be a part of, and that was my first project when I joined them, building this. So don't walk under it; it may not be. I'm not a builder, but it's fitting that an organization that gave so much to the town of Cheshire in their 64 years of existence, the Cheshire JCs, and built something that later will be used to honor somebody who gave so much to us in the tragedy of 9/11. I think is very fitting, and I think it's proper, and I'm very supportive of this, and I'm glad we could do something to honor Mark's memory and also appreciate the JCs for what they've done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bowery. Any questions or comments from members of the council? Okay, seeing none. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Those that are there. Mr. Slocum, I believe you have a secondary resolution to this.
There is. Be it resolved, the town council approves resolution 071420-13. Be it resolved that the town council suspends further naming of town-owned property until the council has reviewed and updated the policy of naming town-owned property that was adopted in 2008.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr.
Thank you. I think that was Ms. Pavano.
It was.
Et al. Thank you. Mr. Slocum?
Well, the only reason behind this, maybe the coincidence of naming something and then putting a moratorium on the policy seems strange and awkward. And it shouldn't be that, but it seemed appropriate through this process where we discovered certain things that we didn't know ahead of time, like what was already named. That, among other things, we thought it was appropriate that we review a process that was in fact a new process in 2008. We hadn't had one up to that time. And so that's the point behind this, just to review it. There may in fact not be any big changes, but again, there needs to be some eyes on it. And I look forward to addressing this through the planning committee.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. And just to follow up on that, later on in the agenda, I'll be referring that to the planning committee for that review of our naming policy. So thank you. Are there questions or comments from members of the council on this? Hearing none. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Of those that are here. We'll move on to 9L. Discussion of possible action regarding the appointment of clerk of the council. Ms. Nichols?
Do you wish me to bring this resolution prior to discussion?
Yeah, I think we had talked a little bit about this. It does talk about possible executive session, but I believe it's ready for resolution. Okay. And if any, why don't we get the resolution on the table? Okay. If there's any issues for members of the council, we can always delay or defer.
Okay, that's great. So I would like to propose this resolution number 071420-14. Be it resolved that the town council appoints Marilyn Milton as clerk of the council for the term February 1, 2020 through January 31, 2021, pursuant to the terms as presented and attached.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. I believe that was Mr. Talbot as a second.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Ms. Nichols?
And just as a little history, Marilyn's contract expired at the end of January, and we were remiss in not getting it solved quickly because of many things, the COVID process among them. And she has agreed to continue in her job for the following 6 months until the end of January 31st at her current rate of pay with no additional increases. So the Personnel Committee felt that it was fair to extend the contract until January 31, 2021.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Nichols. I would also support advancing this resolution. So I guess I'll open it up for questions or comments from members of the council. And if anyone has any concerns about advancing it, certainly let us know.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, I'm in support of this as well. Especially during the last 3 months, it's been a very difficult time for all of us, especially the person who has to take the minutes for these meetings. I'm sure it's with glitches coming in and out and trying to figure out what people are saying. And then I found out she's only been listening to us on YouTube, which could be even worse than being on the Zoom call. So I think she's been doing a great job, and I appreciate her willing to keep at the same contract through the end of the year.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any other questions or comments from members of the council?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Talbot.
I would just say the Personnel Committee was unanimous in their support of this. I echo Mr. Walsh's comments and appreciate the efforts provided by Mrs. Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Any other members of the council?
Can't wait to see Marilyn.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Slocum. Anybody else? Okay, then with that, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passed unanimously, or those that are here. Thank you, Ms. Nichols. We're going to move on to number 10, Town Manager Report and Communications. Mr. Kimball?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, I will begin with the town manager's report. First, I'd like to just do some updates on our town expansion of services plan. At the last meeting, I presented a more exhaustive list of everything that we've had in place over the last few months and where things are. So these are some updates, but I'm happy to answer any questions. With respect to Town Hall continues to be open and available to the public during regular business hours. A staff person is now located at a table just inside the main door to admit visitors in order to manage traffic and receive tax payments that don't require receipts. Representatives from town offices are called down by the staff member to greet visitors and assist in department offices if needed. We are limiting office visits to the departments to one visitor per office at a time, but visitors are permitted to wait in the lobby at this time, which we felt, especially given the heat and some of the inclement weather out there, is a better service for our visitors. The Cheshire Community Pool reopened on June 22nd with extensive social distancing markers and procedures. Times can be reserved in advance for 3 hours and 15 minutes long per slot, with 30-minute breaks in between when extensive cleaning is conducted by our staff. The day rates are $5 per resident and $10 per non-resident per time slot. And there's much more information, including all of those time slots that do vary from weekdays to the weekends on the Community Pools website. Cheshire Public Library started its grab and go pickup of physical books and materials beginning June 23rd. This service also includes black and white printing options now, and also picking up tax documents. Orders can be made through the library's online catalog system, and more information is also found at cheshirelibrary.org/grab-and-go. The main drop box for the parking lot side was reopened on June 19th, and all materials are quarantined, just so the public know, for 7 days before they're recirculated. And no fines, just as a reminder to folks, are accruing at this time for any late materials. The playgrounds and courts, all playgrounds and courts have reopened with signs advising anyone with possible symptoms not to use the playground or the basketball or tennis court. Signs also advise that playgrounds are not sanitized and should be used cautiously. The Bartlome Park Kids in Motion Playground is waiting on 2 last pieces of equipment to complete the recent renovation and just should be open hopefully within about 2 weeks. And just credit to our parks director certainly, but also George and his team, the public works crew, and the parks maintainers have been excellent in trying to help move that project along with a lot of great work. So we're really excited to show off the new Kids in Motion Playground very, very soon. Moving on, the town council adopted the fiscal 21 annual capital budget and 5-year capital plan on June 23rd. The annual capital budget was approved at $6.11 million. And 3 projects will go forward to public referendum to the voters on Tuesday, November 3rd. As a reminder, those are the HVAC and locker room improvements at the police station for $1.4 million, the road improvement program at $1.6 million, and $620,000 for the road reconstruction of Industrial Avenue. Tax bills were mailed at the end of June, and residents were reminded that town council had approved and adopted a 60-day extension per the option made available by the governor's executive order. Deadline for tax bills to be considered late is now October 1st, 2020. Taxpayers are encouraged to pay online or by mail or use the drive-up payment box located at the Circle Town Hall parking lot to help with social distancing. But as I said at the outset, you can also bring your tax payment here in person. We have a number of scheduled debris and recycling events that I'd like to just draw your attention to that we've scheduled. The town of Cheshire will be opening the former transfer station at 1304 Waterbury Road, which is Route 70, for Cheshire residents to drop off organic yard debris free of charge. Grass clippings, leaves, and brush can be dropped off at the facility Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to noon, from July 20th to the 24th, and also again July 27th until July 31st. No logs or stumps are accepted, no contractors or landscapers are allowed, and proof of residency could be required. And just please note that due to the COVID-19 restrictions, participants do need to be able to unload and offload their own vehicles if they use this option. Recycling, we have another recycling event that we'll be holding on August 15th from 9 a.m. Electronics recycling event on August 15th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. We've confirmed today the location will be the town hall parking lot, similar to the way we do the mattress recycling events. A list of acceptable items can be found at the link I provided, and we've linked on our homepage of our website. But residents should also be aware they can regularly dispose of up to 7 electronics items free of charge at the AJ Waste Transfer Station at 22 Burton Drive on Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And also, I know the council is aware of this, but just for the public's consumption, the new household hazardous waste drop-off began July 1st, new options for Cheshire residents. The town of Cheshire is now contracting with the Regional Water Authority to dispose of unwanted household hazardous waste. This can be done as it was in prior years, a few years ago, at 90 Sergeant Drive in New Haven. The 2020 season begins July 1st and now runs through October. And the facility is open Saturdays from 9 a.m. To noon. Proof of residency and online pre-registration and COVID protocols during this time are required. So please use the link that we've provided, and we have more links to this on our homepage again. The Jarvis Street Connectivity Sidewalk Project has begun. The town of Cheshire's constructing approximately 1/2 mile long sidewalk on Jarvis Street between the Farmington Canal Heritage Trail and Guinevere Ridge, which began in the week of July 6th. Martin Lavero, contractor of Bristol, is performing the work, which will take approximately 2 months to complete. It was awarded from a $386,100 sidewalk connectivity grant from the state of Connecticut Department of Transportation. And this will provide increased pedestrian access and public safety to and from the linear trail for several large area neighborhoods. More public works projects. As folks are aware, the West Johnson Bridge replacement project has begun. We're in the process of replacing the bridge at West Johnson Avenue over the 10 Mile River. West Johnson Avenue will be closed to all through traffic, including buses and emergency vehicles, tonight between Dickerman Road and Reinhardt Road for approximately 3 months, commencing on or about July 1st and remaining closed through September 30th. Access to local businesses up to the barricades will be maintained. Peck Lane and Schoolhouse Road have been designated as the detour route during this construction period. So please, that we have available link to the map showing the road closure and detour. And any questions can be directed to the Department of Public Works or George's personal cell phone number, which I can bring. We've received some questions regarding the traffic cameras that were recently installed by the Connecticut Department of Transportation at the top of West Main Street and Maple Avenue. We have been advised by the state these cameras are for traffic management only. They are not live streaming. They take snap images, they convert the data, and then the image is deleted. The camera detects how many vehicles are stuck in traffic, and then will adjust the lights to keep traffic flowing and prevent any backups. These cameras cannot be used for traffic or red light enforcement by law. I know that's a question a number of you probably received. We have an update to our current road milling and paving program. I've provided a list of the upcoming roads for round 2, if you will, to be starting soon. Please note Wallingford Road and Elm Street will now be paved in early spring of 2021. And in their place, the northern section of Cheshire Street and then parts of Oregon Road will be paved during the upcoming round of paving. So you'll see the list there. I'm getting close here. Just a couple of updates on our energy efficiency lighting upgrade. We received some good news that the town was eligible, and we submitted application for additional rebates from the LED lighting upgrade project we approved last year. These additional rebates will total $28,023 as part of the townwide LED conversion project in municipal buildings. Town Council authorized this project to use the on-bill zero interest financing. So these unexpected savings will reduce our payback time substantially. And just so you're aware, the project's about 95% complete with the upgraded field lights at Cheshire Park currently in progress. The project gets close to wrapping up. I mentioned the Kids in Motion playground improvements earlier, so I won't go through this in detail. But again, we hope in a couple weeks we'll be able to do hopefully ribbon cutting at the recently renovated Kids in Motion playground. And Chesprocott today notified us that they will be doing, well, they've been very, very busy, as you can imagine with COVID. They are prepping for flu season as well. And they announced today a drive-through flu clinic on Thursday, October 1st from 10 a.m. to noon at the Church Green here across from Town Hall. Participants will drive up, remain in their car, and nurses from Hartford Healthcare will provide the vaccination. So please stay tuned for additional information. So I know that was a lot to cover, but I wanted to get it all out there for you, and we'll make sure this is on our website for folks to link to if they need to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kimball. Appreciate all the information. And I know you and your staff have been working really hard in light of COVID and other things, so thank you for all your hard work. Any questions or comments from members of the council?
Just,
Mr. Walsh?
yeah, just 2 quick questions. We had a mattress recycle event that was canceled in April. Do we have anything rescheduled in the near future for that? Because I've had a couple inquiries about that.
Yeah, we do. I'll get you the dates. I don't have them in front of me. But,
Okay, it'll be up on the website, I'm assuming then. Okay. The second thing is, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about Mixville, but I mean, I think there's some confusion as to whether the beach is open or not. And, according to the governor's executive orders, all inland waterways are supposed to be closed, although people have been going in there, but we're trying our best to follow whatever the governor's executive orders is. But I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit, Sean.
Sure. I mean, Mixville has been certainly a source of some debate and consternation, especially its unique nature as a typically pass-based. You have to purchase a pass to use the facility. And given that at least the beginning of this year and now as we're halfway through really the summer, it does present a number of unique logistical challenges. We have not opened the swimming area basically on the advice and in consultation with Chesprocott, our health department, but also because we are following, as you suggested, the state's rules for their own inland swimming areas. Technically, we can open it if we want to. We are not bound by what the state is doing for their facilities, but we are using them and their experts as a guide for what we should do for our own. The water, has been tested. I know there was some confusion over whether, initially Chesprocott hadn't tested the water at the very beginning of the summer, as they typically do due to the backlog they had with COVID. It is being tested, so we're monitoring it, and it is safe from the traditional, any concerns of contamination in Mixville. But from a social distancing standpoint, with respect to COVID, the ability to separate on the beach and try to maintain numbers. I mean, the biggest issue we've had at Mixville is trying to not especially without a gate guard or any pass system in place, we really don't want to encourage congregating for long periods of time. And that's really, while outdoor activities are best, you know, we do know that long exposure times and possibly congregating with large numbers of people is certainly something that we were advised to proceed cautiously with by CHESPRCOT. So, you know, I know, you know, Mr. Walsh, we attended the Rec Commission meeting just last week. And I know it was a topic of at Mixville, where we have our annual meeting at Mixville to talk about some of these issues. John is putting together some ideas for how we might move forward for the rest of the season. But it's definitely been a challenge. But just to clarify and answer your question, at this time, the beach area and the swimming area is not open. And we are following the state guidelines for their own waterways.
And the geese issue is subsiding?
It is. I mean, we are back engaged and contracted with, as of, I guess, for the last few weeks now, the goose mitigation specialist, I believe is his title. And so he has been, I mean, George could certainly speak to that a little more than I can with respect to the regularity that he's out there. And that piece is back in place right now.
He's, as Sean just said, he's on the job, and we haven't gotten complaints about excessive geese in the area. He comes through pretty regularly and unloads his dogs as needed to shoot them away.
And the only other thing I would comment on Mixville, we have opened the other parks restrooms. The only one we have to date not opened is Mixville. And again, it comes back to the advice of CHESPRCOT of trying not to encourage long, you know, gatherings that take a long time, that people stay for a while. And so part of the issue with the restrooms is if you have those open, you're kind of encouraging people just to kind of stay all day. So that's been one of the strategies, but you know, we're certainly open to, we're hearing a lot of resident feedback. We're taking it under advisement and trying to proceed cautiously. And that's really been the name of the game.
Thank you.
I had a quick question.
Go ahead,
Mr.
Jim.
Jinks?
Yeah, Sean, so the traffic cams at in those two locations, is the state DOT looking to make changes to those intersections? Is that what's going on? Did they give any indication?
In terms of changes to the intersection, I think those were.
They routinely go through the intersections and kind of update the software, if you will. And those intersections were upgraded a couple of years ago,
right,
with new pedestrian signals and all that. So I think they're just trying to true up the software. Sean was saying, get the. I think those cameras are telling them at 3 p.m. normally there's a big line of traffic on West Main waiting to turn, and the traffic lights will reflect that. They're smart signals, if you will. They're kind of.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, I think as George said, those particular signals were recently upgraded, so I don't foresee any other updates there. I think it's more to the overall technology. And again, this is, as I understand it, sort of replacing the traditional, you know, weight-based the coils in the pavement that your car, you know, notifies the signal that you're there at certain intersections. This is supposed to be a higher tech and more, I guess, apt to capture the number of people that might be waiting rather than those first couple of cars that are there.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you,
Good
Mr. Jinks.
question.
Other questions? Mr. Slocum?
Yeah, first with a comment and a thanks, actually. Arnett especially was very helpful in securing place and everything else that was necessary for the Bennetts and the Historical Society to be able to do their sort of annual expected reading of the Declaration of Independence and the background that goes into it. And it was especially nice this year, and also kind of hard to choreograph because the community band wasn't going to make it, and it was just a little more compromised than it's been in the past. And I wanted to thank, on behalf of everyone involved, the town for doing what it did to make it happen. It was a beautiful day, and I think they're due all the credit that I'm giving them, as well as the Bennetts and the Historical Society for doing a great thing. So with that, I just had a few questions. Number one of my first really to Sean has to do with just our meetings in general. this Zoom stuff has got to come to an end. I know I'm the Philistine in the bunch that really hates wearing masks, and I complain, and I'm maybe to be subjectified to prison for that. But I think this thing has to end, and I think we have to do everything to accommodate getting our meetings more publicly available. I'm thinking of two things, not only the council, but we've got planning and zoning. We've got some big interests in some public hearing items coming up, and I don't feel we are facilitating properly the presentation of our meetings to that end. So the public I mean, we get to comment as counselors, and we're Republican, that's what we're elected to do. But the public really wants to speak to us, I believe, and we need to provide a forum. If it's not going to be council chambers, because you can only get 3 people in there, then we need to say, okay, it's going to be the Thorpe Auditorium. We need to accommodate this. And I think if it means they're not video to be seen on cable or something, we should be prepared to do that. We still have a secretary that can take minutes. But I think if the public wants to speak to an important item coming before planning and zoning or even this body, they should do it in a public chat. And I think you guys really have to work hard at accommodating that. And I all know that we have the backdrop of the governor making changes all the time, and they're doing this throughout the country. And I'm just standing a little pushback. And if it only has to be me doing the pushback, I'm going to just be screaming for it. That's all. That's it. That's a little pontificating, but that's how I feel. And I think we're doing a disservice to letting this stuff on and on and on. And our kids better be back in school next September too, because they'll be working on that too.
Don't go there now.
Okay,
No, I'm
thank you,
telling you,
Mr.
that's where it's going. I'm sorry, but this is getting to me.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Did
I
you have some, Rob, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say something.
Yeah,
And,
okay, go ahead.
I was gonna support you with the notion that I think we need to do everything we can to make sure that we're providing opportunities for the public to speak to any matter that is important to them before this community, whether it be planning and zoning, whether it be town council or any other forum. I couldn't agree with you more on that, Tim. And I think we certainly should be, and I'm hopeful that we'll be prepared for our next town council meeting to meet in person. I think we've all kind of weighed in on that. My recollection was that we've all supported trying to do that. I think clearly I'm in the camp of making sure that we do it in a way that supports everybody in this process. A number of us are on different ends of this spectrum, I guess, relative to COVID. I'm probably down the middle, I suspect, and I think some people are on one end and others on the other. And I think we do have to be respectful. What's that, Sylvia?
And some people are way on the other end. Yes.
Yeah, and I think we need, I guess my point is, I absolutely think we should be trying to meet in person if we can, but we need to be respectful to all people. And I do believe we can accommodate that. And I too would hope that next council meeting will be held in person. I think we have the capability to do it. I think, Sean, you've heard from a number of us on the council that we'd like to see that happen. So unless something changes, hopefully we're moving forward with the idea that you will try to do something in person next time, and you will have whatever equipment is necessary to support that, and we'll work together to design the room so that it accommodates everything that we need to make sure people feel safe, but they can have their voices heard in a more personal format. So I agree with Mr. Slocum in that. I have heard from a number of people recently in particular that they feel as though because of Zoom, their voices are not heard, particularly on important matters. And I think we need to take that seriously. So that's what I want to say on that matter as well. If there's no other questions or comments for Sean on his report, are there?
I have a question, not for Sean on his report, but we often pass over police and fire. And I did have some questions on police, so I'm not sure you're ready to go there yet, but they would be directed at Sean because I know the chief's not here. May I go forward?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry, Tim. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks.
of course.
I didn't
absolutely.
want to.
My apologies. I just assumed you knew you could go forward. My
Oh, well,
apologies.
okay, fine. I noticed the statistics are way up on motor vehicle theft, and I also know that we're all aware of that there's obviously been an uptick. I don't know if that's COVID related or it's just become a new fun and games thing, but clearly those are up, and for some of the same reasons. I know keys are in cars and all kinds of stuff like that too. But I'd from the chief on that. I probably should have telegraphed it or something, but just to get a little bit of background on what enforcement activity is going on, because I can also see motor vehicle arrests, motor vehicle warnings are of course way down by a mile, and I assume that has all to do with COVID because of not wanting to approach people in an abundance of caution and all that other excuse that we need to have. I just wonder how it's impacting public safety. Maybe there's no demonstration that it is. It's not like, accidents are super, they're down as well. It's just an interesting report, begs a lot of questions. And Sean, I really don't expect you to answer them, but those are my questions for the chief. If we could get maybe a little feedback on that. And I guess when there's an expectation to get on plan. We're just in this fuzzy area here, and they're just allowing to go on. We're going to stay in the fog forever, and we're not going to recover.
I can speak to, and I appreciate it. I'll definitely ask Chief Strife to provide some more color around the questions that you have. I will say, and he and I have talked about this, it's a little bit of a combination, but not just, any lack of wanting to approach folks. That's not really entirely what's been going on. A lot of what you're seeing too with the motor vehicle accidents and arrests is simply less people on the road too. So we have had for a time, especially June a little less so, but in some of those early months, and as anyone who drove around town saw when we were doing lockdown, there was virtually no traffic. So you are seeing less accidents on Route 10 and other areas. But certainly the chief has also sent the message that it is time to get back to full enforcement and making sure that all of the rules and regulations are being followed properly, and making sure we're doing enforcement at a full level. So I'll certainly let him speak to that as he can, a little better than I can. But it's certainly, as you look at the year-to-date numbers, they are way down, and frankly, that is in large part due to the lockdown and the lack of people driving on the roads.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes,
I think
Ms.
it's
Pavano,
fire-
absolutely.
The fire question. I noticed there were 31 alarm calls in June. I'd like to ask, who pays for that? Does the homeowner pay for that when somebody comes to their home, or how does that work?
The false alarms, are you talking about?
Yeah, they look like malfunctions, alarm systems.
I will tell you, not speaking for the chief, but as an operator of a business in town that has an occasional false alarm, I will tell you that they do give some leeway, and there's a couple warnings, but then there is a penalty phase that kicks in after a certain number.
Okay. Thank you.
That's correct. That's my understanding as well.
Any other questions or comments from members of the council for Mr. Kimball? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to number 11, reports of committees of the council. Chairman's report A, starting with Ms. Nichols.
Well, audit is finished its job for the
Sorry,
moment.
Ms. Nichols, my apologies. I coughed right in the middle of your stuff.
Audit has completed its immediate task at this meeting. Personnel is still working with contract negotiations, and we will continue to do so.
Mr. Slocum?
Planning will be meeting soon, as soon as we can schedule it anyway, presumably sometime in July, to discuss the RFP for, the planning committee legal services discussion, as well as the naming policy.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Mr. Barry?
Nothing in addition to what we already had this evening from the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. Mr. Walsh?
Solid waste, we're not having any meetings right now, but I am assuming we will probably be having one shortly. There's some issues that are coming up that we will be addressing.
But it's flowing well.
Everything's flowing wonderfully, as far as I could tell.
That's all we need to know. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. You're doing a great job. I think that's it for now. I know Mr. Veliver is gone. And we'll move on to referrals, which I have. I'm going to refer the naming policy to the planning committee. I also have a referral of the legal services RFP process to the planning committee as well. So with that, I'll move on to number 12, miscellaneous and appointments, liaison reports. Ms. Nichols?
All right, liaison report. All of the committees that I am a liaison for are meeting virtually, and several have been canceled for lack of quorum. So,
right. Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Mr. Slocum?
Nothing to report.
Laurie?
Nothing other than economic development today, this evening. Thank you.
Mr. Walsh?
No report.
Ms. Pavano, I know you're new, so I assume you don't have them, but I'll ask you anyway.
No, I don't have any. Thank you.
Mr. Talbot?
No report, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jinks?
Yeah, just a quick report. We did meet, beautification committee did meet last week, the week before. It was the first time we met. Actually, it was in person in the council chambers. And I can tell you the way the room is set up, it leaves enough room there for the members of the committee and staff, but really not much room for anybody else. So it'll be interesting to see how we get back in there. But and also we did have a meeting last week for the public safety committee, and nothing really to report there.
Thank you, Mr. Jinks. Okay, we'll move on to appointments to boards and commissions. I do have a number of appointments, and I know we normally go to Ms. Nichols and to Mr. Talbot, but there's a couple of appointments that I'm going to make as chair, which are beyond the 60-day. We have talked about this in our caucus for the appointments that we need to make. So we're going to be making two appointments to the Public Building Commission, one of Diane Waldron, who I believe, and Ms. Pavano, please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe she's an independent that will replace Mr. Nash, and her term will be, what's that?
She's unaffiliated.
Unaffiliated, what, yeah, I thank you.
Sure.
And I believe her term will be from present to January 31st, 2021.
Right.
We have another appointment to the Public Building Commission, which I will make as chair on Mr. Don Naito, who is a Republican and will replace Mr. Croker. And his term will be from present to January 31st, 2022. And I believe there's also an Energy Commission appointment of Mr. George Romani, who is replacing Mr. White. I believe he's a Republican, and his term will present from present to January 31st, 2021.
Right.
So Ms. Pavano, am I correct in that?
You are, yes, yes.
Ms. Nichols, are you in agreement with that as our?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you
great.
for doing that. It's important.
Okay, so we're making those appointments, and I guess with that, I'll, Mr. Talbot, would you be willing to second those appointments?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. I appreciate that. And if there's no questions or comments, I'll call for a vote on those appointments. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. And at this point, I guess, Mr. Talbot, I'll ask you, do you have any appointments?
I do not, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. I appreciate that. We'll turn to number 13, Town Attorney Report and Communications. Is Attorney Smith on the call?
I am. And
Hello,
there's no
Mr.
report.
Smith. Thank you, sir. And with that, we'll move on to council communications, letters to the council. I do have a couple of letters, but I'll ask members of the council if they have anything first.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Walsh.
I did receive several letters and emails regarding the Hazel Drive development there, and I did refer those to the planning and zoning since that doesn't fall within our what we are doing on the council. So it is more of a planning and zoning issue. But I did receive the letters, and I want to make sure that the public does know that these were passed over to planning and zoning as they should be.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any other communications from members of the council? Hearing none. I think we all received a couple of letters, one dated June 17th and one dated June 23rd from Ms. Bonnie DeMauro. And I will read them. Please bear with me. I think she certainly deserves the right to hear these letters be heard, and I want to make sure that I get them on the record for her. I have lived in Cheshire since 1975. As a longtime resident, I like to take pride in the appearance of our town, especially on Route 10 in the heart of town. Since arriving, I immediately noticed an unsightly front yard at 111 Highland Avenue on the border of our beautiful historic district, which is ironic. As a town council member between 2000 and 2002, I worked with Michael Milone to try and do something about this eyesore. The state came in and put an attractive wall up on the property, not at the owner's expense. Then the owner said the wall blocked his view coming out of his driveway. Did anyone actually live there? So the state tore the wall down. Afterward, I was told that either the state or the town gave the property owner money to fix up the front yard. I believe he must have kept the money but never fixed the appearance of his yard. Now I understand the owner has encroached the cemetery property, causing some conflict. I arrived in 1975, and God only knows how long this property has been an ugly sight to behold by both residents and people driving through town. Ironically, I learned that the same owner owns a terrible-looking house in disrepair at 11 Williamsburg Drive, which I have been driving by on a regular basis since 1993. I also don't know how long this situation has existed. The exterior of the house was a mess. The grass and has been periodically 3 to 4 feet high. Large construction equipment was left for ages at the side of the driveway. A couple of years ago, it appeared that the owner was addressing the exterior of the house, which was never completed. New windows were put in at that time. This activity has not progressed. I feel sorry for the neighbors across the street and on the street in general for having to put up with this awful appearance. I would request that the town take action to enforce the owner of these unsightly properties to take some responsibility for upgrade and to have some consideration for residents who have had to look at them for decades. Thank you, Ms. Bonnie DeMauro. And that letter was dated June 17, 2019. There was a follow-up letter on June 23rd, 2020. And I just want to give the background for her because I think it's important, and that's why I read the 2019 letter. But her most recent letter is also encloses a letter that I wrote to the council regarding the deplorable conditions of 2 properties owned by the same person at 111 Highland Ave and 11 Williamsburg Drive. And I want to make sure we have that as context as to how long she's been concerned about this. As expected, these properties are still in deplorable condition and eyesores to the community. For those who were not in the council last year, please refer to my letter, which I just read in 2019. I'm very disappointed this town does not have the foresight to include in the recent ordinance changes of unsafe structures and premises ordinance the issue of blight, as these 2 properties perfectly portray. Why did the ordinance committee avoid including in the ordinance something about unkept property? This property owner cares nothing about the disgusting appearance of his properties and how it reflects on our beautiful community. If a property must be unsafe for the town to put pressure on such property owners, then I would think that at least the property on Highland Avenue could easily be labeled as unsafe. The front yard has basically fallen away from the house front porch and is also encroached on the cemetery to the side. Is this town waiting until the ground in front of the porch gives way and the house falls into the street? No one can safely walk across this property without danger of falling or twisting an ankle. And if the owner was in fact given money in the past to fix up the front yard, as I was told when I was on the council, couldn't he be subject to some legal enforcement since it was never repaired? Also, it must be embarrassing that this property is on the border where our historic district begins. As for the house on Williamsburg Drive, the grass is now about 4 feet tall. The siding was never completed and it looks like plastic coverings are hanging and flopping about all around the outside of the structure. If property owners next to and across the street from this house needed to sell their homes, there would be no one in their right mind who would think of purchasing these homes. Believe it or not, this property looked worse years ago when there was construction equipment randomly parked around and on the driveway. I feel sorry for the neighbors and the entire neighborhood for having to look at the mess day in and day out. I must wonder, due to the conditions of both of these properties, if wildlife has invaded not only the yards, but the homes themselves. Could this be health risk? I would like to ask that someone from the ordinance committee or the district counselors of these two properties give me feedback as to why this situation has been tolerated for decades. Thank you, Miss Bonnie DeMauro, 5 Carriage House Way in Cheshire. So I wanted to read those into the record. The only thing I can say to Ms. DeMauro is I think we share some of her concerns, and I think that this is being looked at through the ordinance committee. We are trying to craft potentially something that becomes a blight ordinance. The unsafe premises ordinance was one piece of this. And I think at the time we decided we needed a bit more time to properly review and consider what might be the appropriate way to handle blight. I'm confident that the ordinance committee understands the importance of some of these properties that you are referencing, as well as others that may be in this community. And I have every confidence that the ordinance committee will be taking this up soon and potentially making some recommendation back to the full council. So with that, I guess, is there anything else in the council relative to council communications? Seeing none. At this point, I guess we're going to move back to executive session, which will be for the reasons of contract negotiations and personnel matters, to include obviously all of the town council, our town manager, I believe for a portion of it, our town manager and our assistant town manager, including our town attorney. Is there anyone else, Mr. Kimball, that we need to be including?
I think because George is here, he's going to stick around for the contract negotiation piece.
Okay, so to include Mr. Nawatney?
Correct.
He's smiling. Is that you don't want to be part of it?
Oh, I'm good.
All right, Mr. Nawatney, have a good night. So I guess to include the individuals I mentioned. If that's the case, then I'd ask for a motion.
So moved.
I think it was Mr. Slocum. Second, was that Mr. Talbot?
It can be if you'd like.
Well, I thought I heard you, Peter, but if it's not,
I
I'll
did.
pick somebody else.
Tim and I both had the motion, so.
Oh,
All right,
sorry
so
about
Tim will
that.
get the first, you'll get the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the motion passed unanimously. We're going to go into executive session. Mr. Kimball, do you need some time to